Hello, my name is Mr. Ferris, but most people call me Brett. Either one's good. I'm a teacher at a Christian school in Auburn Hills, Michigan, where I teach Bible and I've taught English in the past as well. I responded to a post that Mr. Baskin put out, and I'm here to talk just a little bit about writing and something that I've learned along the way. I think it's safe to say that most of the fictional characters or non fictional characters that we know and love all have one thing in common. One important characteristic that they all have to defeat, and that is their own flaws. Just about any character you're going to read about or watch on the big screen is going to have one flaw they have to deal with. One internal weakness of some sort that he or she has to conquer or find a way around in order to win, save the day, save the princess, or whatever you're watching. Some of these flaws are super glaringly obvious. You've got Superman. Put him in a room full of kryptonite, and he's just some regular dude that just about anybody can take, depending on the comic book writer that is. You got Buzz Lightyear, who faces the flaw of an existential crisis and denial when he realizes that he's just a toy, which would probably mess with my head too. But the question then becomes, what do we do with these character flaws? How do we deal with them? There's really two options. One of them is much more historically utilized than the other one, and we're going to talk about that one first. So first, you can write a story in which your character, through hard work, effort, the assistance of some plucky sidekick character, or all three, defeats that flaw. Gets to the point where that flaw no longer exists, they've learned to live with it, they've overcome it, and it doesn't really bother them anymore. We see this happen a lot. This has happened over and over again in movies, in literature, in video games, if you're a gamer like me. Yes, I am a gamer. So let's look at one of my most favorite and revered heroes in all of fiction. Luke Skywalker. I love Star Wars, and I love the character of Luke Skywalker. He's one of my absolute favorites. So, for those that don't know Star Wars, a little minor spoiler alert from the old ones anyway, which are the best ones, let's be honest. So Luke starts off on a desert planet, and he spends two and a half, give or take, depending on how you look at it, movies being told that he's impatient, that he's brash, he's overeager, and he needs to change his life, and he needs to change it now. So he has to deal with this impatience over and over again as the movie goes. And it culminates with him putting his training on hold in order to rescue his friends. He charges headlong into a very deadly situation that he's not ready for, that I think inwardly he knew he wasn't ready for yet. And he comes face to face with Darth Vader, and this mistake cost him an arm and a leg, or just an arm. I had to. However, by the end of Return of the Jedi, spoiler alert again, we see that he's become this really strong-willed hero who's understanding of the Force. He's ready to draw out the good in his father Vader, and he ends up overcoming the character flaw that was presented in A New Hope. So from A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, his biggest character flaw is his impatience, which, if you're a fan of the prequels or if you've watched them, was also a flaw of his father, Anakin Skywalker. So by the end of the movie, by the end of the trilogy, he succeeds in conquering this character flaw, becomes one of his greatest strengths actually, and he ends up becoming the Grand Master of the New Jedi Order. Now, I'm going to be honest with you guys, I am not brave enough to even bring up or discuss the new sequels, because those are very dividing, so I'm not going to touch those. But Luke Skywalker, in my opinion, is one of the best and well-written characters in fiction. His character is actually based off of the traditional monolith known as the hero's journey, and he touches just about every base absolutely perfectly, so I am not at all trying to bash Luke Skywalker character. Some say he's almost Arthurian in his structure, as a classic hero who slays evil, saves the day, defeats the demons in himself as well, and he's a very well-written character. However, does the structure of overcoming your personal shortcomings always work, especially in the real world? Think about that for a second. So in the real world, the Apostle Paul asked God multiple times, this was recorded in 2 Corinthians 12 verse 8, to remove a thorn that he had in his side. Some defect that was hindering his life. Now, we don't know what the defect was for sure. There are some scholars that think that he may have had poor eyesight, and this is backed up by the scripture in Galatians 6:11, in which we see him say, "See what large letters I use when I write to you with my own hand," which implies that even though he wrote most of the prison epistles that he was known to have authored, He may not have actually been sitting there with the pen writing himself, but we don't know for sure. However, he has a character flaw, and he wants to get rid of that character flaw. He wants to conquer that character flaw, and he wants to beat it out, just like Luke Skywalker did. However, if you guys don't know the story, it's actually a really great story. I recommend reading it. We go back to 2 Corinthians 12, and God says no. And Paul didn't just ask once. He's asked multiple times, God, please remove this character flaw from me. Take the thorn from my side. And God says no, and he says, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. So Paul, even though he becomes arguably the greatest evangelist of all time, and he's such an influential character in the New Testament, doesn't beat that character flaw. That fatal flaw stays with him for as far as we know his entire life. He never beats that out. So that brings me to my second point. Something that I've learned along the way is you can have a character who has a character flaw that never beats it. That flaw might never be removed. And in some cases, it could even get worse by the end of the book. It doesn't mean your character cannot be a hero. It doesn't mean they're doomed to become a villain or an anti-hero. But you can write a character who never beats that flaw. Let's look at another famous fictional character, for instance. The one and only, quote, famousest of hobbits, Frodo Baggins. I love Lord of the Rings. This is going to be a bit of a spoiler alert for Return of the King, so if you haven't seen that yet, I'm forewarning you guys now. So, Frodo starts off by being burdened with something that nobody else in Middle-earth can bear. He has to bear the One Ring. Gandalf, the mighty wizard, can't do it. Aragorn, the future king, cannot do it. Legolas, the bow-wielding, amazing archer who, honestly, probably should have been in the L'Oreal commercial. I'm kidding. But his hair looked pretty cool. He couldn't do it either. So you would think that Frodo being able to pick up the ring and even take it to Rivendell, which he does in the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring, or around the first couple minutes of the movie anyway, you might think he's going to beat out that potential flaw. However, he doesn't. As you watch, even starting from the halfway point to Fellowship of the Ring, throughout the Two Towers, it starts to get a little bit worse. He hears the ring speaking to him. You get to Return of the King, and Frodo is just about to go to Mount Doom. He gets stopped by Shelob along the way at one point. Sam ends up taking the ring for a little bit. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit detailed with the spoiler alerts. But Frodo has this moment with Sam where he takes the ring back. Sam almost doesn't want to give it to him. And Frodo explains, it's not your burden to bear. And you might think at this point that Frodo's gotten used to bearing that burden. Maybe he's beat the temptation that he's been feeling to keep the ring throughout the Two Towers. However, Frodo comes to Mount Doom. He's holding the ring right over the fire. He looks at Sam and he says, the ring is mine. And he tries to keep it. And he doesn't get a redeeming moment later where he decides, no, I'm going to give up this potential for power. He only throws the ring in the fire because Gollum, who was possessed and obsessed by the ring for decades and decades and decades, maybe even centuries if memory serves. It's been a while since I've read Lord of the Rings. Takes it from him and falls into the fire. And that's the only what causes the ring to be destroyed. It's the only way. So Frodo doesn't get that heroic moment. He never overcame that critical flaw in his character. That he was possessed by the ring, that selfishness and that desire for power. Even though you could argue it wasn't really his fault because the ring was put in his head, he doesn't really get that redemptive moment. So those are the two ways that you can take a character that you're writing and deal with that critical flaw that they have. Two examples that I have really quick. I have two novels that I've been working on for, actually I'm not going to say how long I've been working on because it's kind of an embarrassingly long time. I have one who is it's a World War II story, and he is a college-age student living in France who experiences the Nazi takeover and occupation of France and of Paris, and he ends up joining a group of guerrilla fighters and ends up without wanting to be, becomes the leader of a resistance cell. And I've got this other character who is half dragon. This is more of a fictional, or more of a fantasy story, excuse me. And he realized he's got a lot of anger issues. He's dealing with the fact that he's half human, half dragon. He kind of gets the flaws of both sides. So he's got this major character flaw too. My World War II character, his name is Gene. His character flaw is self doubt. He doesn't believe in himself at all. He does it from the beginning of the story, and he struggles with that a lot. In becoming a leader, when it's, he has to go from I'm getting ready to go to college and university to I am responsible for people's lives. And then you've got my dragon character. His name is Zado with an X. I like X's. I don't know why. And his whole thing is he loves battle. He lives for it. And then he realizes later that he has a sister that he has to protect. And then he has to try to deal with that anger that he deals with. And he ends up getting betrayed a few times throughout the story. So Gene fits more into number one. By the end of the book, he learns to be more sure of himself. He starts to rise to the occasion. The responsibility of leading these people into battle, even though that was never something he was trained for or ever wanted for himself. And by the end, he feels very sure of himself. He feels strong. He's grown. He's become a different person that his mother doesn't even recognize. And he becomes a hero. Zeno, on the other hand, causes a lot of problems, actually, because that anger, that fiery temper that he has, I had to, never goes away. And he doesn't learn to live with that. It actually gets worse and worse and worse and worse as the story goes, to when he ends up betraying a few friends of his own. And his story doesn't have the redemptive, happy arc that Gene's does. So if I'm peddling my own work here just a little bit, I think that both these characters are just as good. They just deal with their character flaws in different ways. So if you are working on a piece of fiction, or even nonfiction, whatever story you're working on, just know that you can take either one of those approaches when it comes to those critical flaws that every character has that makes them human, quote unquote, or humanizes them a bit. If you want to tell a little bit of a darker tale where your hero doesn't really succeed fully or doesn't deal with their inner demons properly, you can. And you can still have a very compelling hero. I mean, Frodo's story still has a heroic ending. He doesn't become a villain. He doesn't become an anti-hero or the bad guy. He's got the happy ending that he deserves, and he really did deserve it, let's be honest. But if you want to stick with the more common, have your character learn and grow and fix that flaw, it does not mean that your characters are cliche and boring. Luke Skywalker is an amazing character. I would say that Obi-Wan Kenobi kind of does the same thing. If you can't tell, I love Star Wars. I mean, you've got characters like Tony Stark in Marvel and the Avengers and the Tony Stark and the Iron Man movies who starts off really selfish, and he doesn't completely change, but you can see it gets a little bit different as he goes. So he's kind of more of that first one. So watch for that. I would really encourage you guys. First of all, whatever you're writing, it is cool. It's awesome that you're writing because it is a very, very hard thing to do. And please try not to be too critical of your own work. Every writer is, but I promise you, your work is better than you think. But that's what I wanted to say to you guys. I hope you guys have an awesome rest of your day. I hope that New Year's is going well for you guys. You guys have a really cool teacher, so I really hope you enjoy his classes. I love his books. I was a huge fan of the Door Within trilogy. I've read those more than I can count. So, it was nice talking to you guys. I'm glad I had the opportunity. In case you were wondering, yes, this is a Matt Stafford LA Rams jersey. I kind of am a bandwagon LA Rams fan because I'm going to root for the Lions. Anyway, thanks for your time. I hope you guys have an awesome rest of your year, and it was nice talking to you guys.